Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for UROC Critical Conversation. UROC Critical Conversations is a series of public discussions that bring together scholars, activists, historians, artists, and community leaders who address urban issues and ideas. Building on UROC's many campus community collaborations, this series is intended as a gathering place for urban-focused research, dialogue, and cultural events. Tonight, we'll be talking about living with pain, managing your pain so it doesn't manage you. We are so excited that you decided to join us. We had a record number of registrations for this conversation tonight. And as I get ready to introduce our incredible moderator who does so much community work, lives for community, lives for our community being healthy, I wanted to share that tonight's discussion is about a pathway to healing, a pathway, not the pathway. What we believe here at UROC and all of the panelists who are here, we believe that you are your own best advocate, and we are not prescribing anything to you, but we are having a discussion about another pathway and what gets us there. So without further ado, I want to introduce Clarence Jones.
Thank you, Makeda, for those remarks. Good afternoon. I am Clarence Jones. I'm the Executive Director and the Community Health Strategist for the Human Partnership. And I have been honored to have been asked to moderate today's community conversation on pain. I want to give a special thank to the planners of this event and also for those of you that are attending. And I do believe that you will have a exciting and interesting time with our conversation as we work together to talk about this particular issue. So Partners for Pain and Wellbeing Equity is an innovative community-based participatory project addressing disparities in pain management. The project is going to be conducted with both researchers as well as community members, the academic community, and we will come together to talk about this important issue around pain. The overall goal is to increase access to evidence-based non-drug and complementary and integrative health approaches, help to improve pain self-management and overall well-being for people with back pains who have been underrepresented and marginalized. Now, why do they need to know? Because they need to have knowledge, they need to have resources, they need to have social support by providers and other people. But the question is, why is this event so special for us? Well, I have never or seldom have ever been in a conversation about back and neck pain. In fact, the only time I have conversations about pain is when I'm complaining. And so it's kind of nice to be in this conversation with these wonderful colleagues of ours to talk about this issue and to approach this, as Makeda said. You know, we are not going to be prescribing anything, but we are definitely going to be describing things. And we hope that with this particular conversation, we'll be able to engage our partners and ask some of your questions. But we want to hear your voice. We look forward to you putting information and questions in the chat. And we will try to answer as many of these questions as we can. And if we can, we'll get back with you because we really, really welcome your input. So we have a unique set of panelists. I want you to know that. We have a pharmacist, we have a researcher, we have a trauma and former pain management practitioner, and you got me. I'm a community member who has stories of how I have dealt with pain. And so I'm hoping that many of you can identify with that and we can have this conversation where we can really begin to look at this. So we have Dr. Marie Chacolas. She is a clinical pharmacist and medication therapist, management specialist. She's a member also of the Minnesota Board of Pharmacy. We have Dr. Ronnie Evans. She is a director of integrative health and wellbeing research program, research associate professor of the Earl F. Bakken Center for Spirituality and Healing, University of Minnesota. And we have my friend, Mr. Sam Simmons. He's a behavior consultant in chemical dependency and culturally sensitive trauma-informed strategies with the Sam Simmons Consulting firm. He's also co-host of the Voices radio program on KMOJ FM. How we're going to do this discussion is that each of the panelists will introduce themselves and then share their story of their epiphany with pain. And when they knew that it was a conversation that needed to be held with others. So let's begin. I'm going to tell you my story. My story of pain will be told in various stages of my life. Now, when I finish my story, it will sound incomplete, and it will be, but there's a reason for it. When I was young, I could never understand why older people would talk about back pain and neck pain. I remember as a little kid, my auntie asking me to walk on her back because she had pain. It just floored me because I'd never had any pains like that. So I'd never understood that. So I was not very, very sympathetic. As a teenager, I was out playing and I ran into a football sled, a football metal sled. I slammed my toe and I had this excruciating pain that happened. And of course, I toughened up and I went on, but I was walking crippled for a couple of years because of that pain. That pain really, and I never talked about it. I just did it. I just went through with it. As an adult, I went to Buffalo, New York, and had a rental car. I was just backing up a little bit and I hit a post. I have never felt such excruciating pain in my life. That little bump caused me to say and to make a vow that I will never talk about anybody else and their back pain. As an adult, as a senior, now I'm a senior, okay? As a senior, as a senior, as a senior, I had a pain of I had a pain that happened with me when I went with my knee. When my knee was when I needed to had bone on bone in my knee, and I began to have to go to the doctor to get those things taken care of. I just want to tell you this: in all of the sessions that I had, I used to cry like a baby, but I had never shared my pain. And so this kind of conversation will be very, very important and very helpful for me as we begin to talk about this whole subject. So I'm going to ask my panelists now to talk about their experience with pain. I want to talk about what is your epiphany with pain, and then how did you know and when did you know that it was important for you to talk about it? So talk about it and talk about how it has shifted in time. So we're going to start with Dr. Rhonda.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Dr. Rhonda Marie Chacolis. I am a pharmacist. And before we get started, I wanted to say the views and opinions that I have do not represent any of the organizations that I'm affiliated with. They're my own views and based on my own experience and clinical experience. And so with that being said, much like Clarence, I would like to start you with a story. Very early on in life, I heard things like no pain, no gain. The pain will leave you once it teaches you something. Life is pain. That shaped my views to help me think that this is something that I'm so supposed to experience, that really there's nothing that can be done about it. I became a mom and I had a son, and I had permission to talk about this, who was told he would never run, he would never walk, and he became a patient at Shriners. And I watched his experience as he endured multiple surgeries and people not maybe giving him the medications that he needed, as he healed. And he eventually, ran and got a D1 rugby scholarship. But my biggest epiphany came in 2016. In 2016, I was on my way to run an errand. And if anybody knows me, I am not one for running errands. And so I always feel like the story is the universe speaking to me, saying that I should not have to do that kind of stuff. But I was hit by a nurse who was going over 25 miles over the speed limit, rushing on her way to work. And I was in a motor vehicle accident. As part of that accident, I had difficulties with my vision, difficulties with walking, and difficulties with even performing my activities of daily living. And one of my visits, I found myself in a doctor's office. And at that visit, I was handed 5 new medications to start. And I thought to myself, there's something definitely that has to be done to help shift the conversation in pain. So thank you.
Dr. Ronnie?
Thank you, Clarence, and thank you, Rhonda, for sharing your story. Also, thank you to Makeda for your leadership and partnership, and many thanks to all in the audience tonight for attending today. It's a real honor to be sharing this space with all of you and conversing with you, having this discussion and learning together. So, my perspectives have been flavored by my professional experiences as a health practitioner. I was originally trained as a chiropractor and then as a scientist. I've been studying pain treatments for about 30 years. And the treatments I study are primarily non-drug options like pain education, mindfulness, spinal manipulation, exercise, behavioral approaches. And I also have chronic pain myself and have experienced both successes and failures in navigating the healthcare system. And I think it's the culmination of my experiences, personal and professional, and more recently, community members, conversations I've had with them, including those experiencing pain-related health disparities, that have led me to some newer epiphanies. And probably the biggest one is how many things I believe we as researchers and clinicians have gotten wrong about managing pain. And in my opinion, these things that we have gotten wrong are playing an important role in the current pain management crisis, in contributing to the persistent inequities that exist in pain care. And there are a lot of them. We know that people who are marginalized, including members of racial and ethnic groups, older people, people with mental and substance use issues, others are less likely to receive the pain care that they need. And this isn't only harming them, it's harming communities as a whole. So one of the first things I think we have gotten wrong in the healthcare system is not fully recognizing how hard it can be for a person to manage chronic pain, especially when faced with other life challenges, including systemic biases and discrimination, financial inequality, lack of access to healthcare and other social resources. And when one is confronted with so many barriers, it becomes overwhelming. And it is normal and only to be expected that people in these circumstances will have trouble managing their pain. But what often happens in healthcare settings, including our own ones I've been in, is we fail to take these challenges into account when we're dealing with people with pain. Often we focus on treating pain from a purely physical perspective using a one-size-fits-all approach. And we're not willing to really see and work with the whole person with pain, kind of tell them to check that other stuff at the door. Our research patients have told us that when we do this in the healthcare system, it's not only ineffective, it's causing damage. Patients also tell us how difficult it is to try and navigate the extremely siloed healthcare system. And this becomes even harder if you have multiple health problems, which is really common when you have pain. So I think for me, one of the most important things we can do is to start having conversations. It's important to start talking about these things now and acknowledge where we've gone wrong. And then listen and learn more deeply about the role that social, economic, and cultural factors are playing in people's pain experiences, because these are things that haven't been looked at in the pain field. We need to ask people what they think they really need. Patients know what they need. We need to listen to them. And then based on what we are learning, develop together community-based solutions that can address these needs. And from what we're seeing, there are a lot of pain management options that can be safely moved from health systems into the community so that people have access to tools to manage their pain better on their own. And that to me is so wildly different from what we have been doing so far in the pain management field. And I think it's really worth trying because what we're doing right now is not working. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ronnie. Mr. Simmons.
Well, I want to thank everyone for allowing me to be here. I feel like I'm living deja vu sitting in the middle of a couple of doctors from my history. This ideal of working with pain or dealing with pain, I injured myself as a truck driver back in the early 80s. I was a delivery service truck driver for the University of Minnesota, and injured my back unloading a truck. Was on workers' comp, that kind of thing, and ended up being referred to a chronic pain clinic, which is interesting. What we are talking about doing now, we were doing then, which is a whole nother conversation, right? That was the beginning of chronic pain management back in the early 80s, and was sent to a chronic pain program, gave the staff hell, cussed them all out, give me my medications. I don't want to hear about none of this, but if I didn't go, I'd have lost my, my workers' comp. I went, and there was a therapist there who was not, he was a consultant, he wasn't on staff. And the thing that he did was at least listen to me, right? And was help and help me start understanding how to connect the dots to my pain, right? The whole mind, body, and soul piece. Yes, physically I was in pain, but how I felt about the world emotionally also had an effect on how I manage or not manage my pain. If you're a person who feels like, say for example, you're the main caretaker of the family, you feel like you don't give yourself permission to take time to do the proper healing. And sometimes when we get to using medications to help us deal with our pain, which I'm not opposed to a proper use of medication at all, but not understanding how, my inability to slow down or believing I can slow down and start getting into this idea that if I take more pain medications, I could do more, which was one of the issues. But there was, it was a thing of looking at my emotional health and connecting that to how I felt about my physical pain, and connecting those dots and connecting the dots about where I was spiritually in my life really helped me start thinking about pain a little bit differently. Probably 3 years or 2 or 3 years, well, a year and a half after I got out of the pain program, I actually started being a volunteer for the pain program to talk to other patients and meet with them when they would come into the pain program and talk to them about, how to give the program a chance, that I was there to listen to what they were saying, wasn't there to judge them, because I think a lot of times when you're dealing with chronic pain and you're dealing with the medical system, you wonder if they really believe that you have pain, and pain is very subjective, but, we talk about our pains very differently, even very differently culturally and that kind of thing. And over time, I also started noticing how different patients were treated differently depending on where they came from and what their culture was. And that included how they talked to these individuals, how they were prescribed medications, and those kind of things. So I ended up being a staff person in the program and becoming one of their primary counselors in terms of what they called the difficult patient. And the difficult patient was just somebody who was scared about losing their livelihood, scared of not being all they could be to their family. And again, sitting down and listening to them, I've been, during that 30, I think it was about 20 years or so, I was called all kind of names and all like that. And once they were done, it's like, but can I help you? Which would stun them, but, walk them through this experience, right? Walk them through how to let them know that they had more power on how they would suffer with their pain, and also give them more education on how to advocate for themselves. So my epiphany about pain, if it was such a one, is just the idea of experiencing mine and connecting them dots emotionally to my pain, and being able to really learn to advocate for myself and help others to advocate for themselves. So we'll learn more as we go.
You know, I really appreciate this conversation. So I'm going to ask you another question, because you both all of you have kind of entered into this area, but I want to be very, very specific and dive a little bit deeper. I want to ask you this question. I want to start with you, Dr. Ronnie. What is pain? What is it made of? And is pain brain or body?
Boy, you're really putting a lot out there. Well, the simple answer, pain is a sensory experience. And like you said, it's a subjective experience often. Often we can't see it. Is it brain or body? I'm going to say it's both. It's what might happen. We can experience an injury in our body to our tissues that sends signals up to our brain. And then our brain can start sending signals back that tense up our muscles, tense up our body. It also can cause us to think about different things like, gosh, I don't want to do that. That's going to hurt me more. And so we have emotions around that too. Feelings and emotions start to come into it. So it's a really complex, we do call it a mind-body phenomenon. So it's both. It's all of that. And I'd add to it, Clarence, I'd say it's not only mind body, but there's also this whole social component around this. These individuals with pain live within the context of a community and all these other social things going on. And, they're not these little bubbles just floating around independent of all that. So,
Okay, thank you.
as you'd say, that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Mr. Simmons. What is pain? What is it made out of? Is pain brain or body?
I don't have an answer for you. That's not my expertise, right? The thing is it is all of those things. The mind, body, and soul in terms of how you respond. But that whole thing about your environment, your personal history, right? I have a personal history of chronic pain. And what do I mean by that? I realized when I started connecting the dots, my mother suffered from chronic pain for years. And the way she dealt with her chronic pain was about dealing with medications. Also, and that piece was just part of it. Also, the chronic pain, she had chronic pain so long that there was times that she used it to her ability to, control her environment, right? In terms of how she was dealing with family members and that kind of thing. And wasn't able to get the information I got about connecting the dots. Think about it. If you're one of the things I learned in working with chronic pain, there was 3 particular characteristics that showed up often in our patients, and it was perfectionism, caretaking, and workaholism. And all of those 3 characteristics have an emotional piece and having a physical piece on it. If I'm a caretaker, I don't know how to necessarily say no for my own well-being, right? But if I have chronic pain and I'm in pain, now I have a legitimate reason not to do stuff for certain people. I have and again, somebody might be saying, well, you're saying that it's all in a person. No, it's individualized, it's subjective. And when we would help people connect those dots and give them the strength to start setting limits and boundaries in their family, especially if they were the main caretaker, right? Or took on that main caretaker role, which I did in my family. So being able to back up and say, it's okay to take care of myself. It's okay to say no. So I guess the answer is, we have the medical answer that was given, but it really is a personal kind of thing that affects all aspects of our life. from our emotions, how we feel about ourselves, definitely physically, but it can also affect us spiritually to the point where we start feeling hopeless. I've had clients question God because of their suffering. So I guess we can throw in there. It's a piece around how do we connect the dots around how we are suffering and the ways we're suffering was very important to help people, really take a real good look at what kind of a piece that this pain was playing in their lives and how to gain control of as much of their life as possible.
Thank you. Dr. Rhonda?
Well, I think those were all great definitions and experiences. And I think one thing that I would like to do is maybe shift the conversation and say, well, what should the definition of pain be? Right? And so the definition of pain should be surrounded by recognizing somebody's body being in dysfunction, not working well, and understanding that experience can affect many areas of their life, including their brain, their body, their relationships, their ability to want to connect with community, their ability to connect with family and friends. So it is a combination of all of those things, but we must make sure that, like, when we talk about these clinical things, that we recognize that perhaps it's time to actually shift the conversation and expand that definition and really make sure that people understand that their individual experience is very much a definition of pain. My definition of pain may not look like Dr. Ronnie's, or may not look like Sam's or Clarence or Makeda's, but my pain is legitimate and it deserves to be addressed and treated. Thank you.
Thank you as well. Sam, let me ask you this question. From your perspective, how should people really understand pain? From your perspective.
Oh, I mean, I often have this aversion to this whole should kind of thing when we start talking about the subjective view. But the thing is, there's many different pieces to pain. Pain, again, as we've been saying, has many different effects on people. But right, our conversation is starting with physical pain, right? And if we don't connect the dots on, okay, so I don't feel good physically, that might mean I don't feel so good emotionally, right? Affect how I feel emotionally, affect how my self-esteem. If my self-esteem and self-worth is built into how I care for others, my self-esteem and self-worth is built into how well I do things. Or my self-esteem is tied into not needing, not being a burden on other people. All of those things are part of that pain experience per se, and because we've often talked about pain or never broadened that view of pain, for a lot of folks never had that experience, they come in with this singular ideal. And the other piece about it, the fear behind not being able to feel like I could do anything about it, right? The fear of feeling helpless, and the big fear we cannot ignore is that people might not believe you, not only in the medical system, right? But even within our families. We could talk about various types of pain in terms of, addiction is tied to pain a lot of times. And sometimes within our own families, within our own communities, even within our own congregations, folks would judge us, we'll feel judged by their response to our pain. So that's my answer for right now. I don't know if it touches what you're asking, or
it works,
that's where
Sam. It's Sam. This is a conversation, man. This is a conversation. Dr. Ronnie, how about for you? What from your perspective, how should people understand pain?
Well, I also have an aversion to the word should as well, so I think one way we can look at understanding pain is looking at it like the chronic condition that it is, and that it's something to maybe be managed and lived through in some ways, instead of being cured. Because I think that's something that we see a lot in chronic pain, is that we're hoping for it just to go away. And it's not just the patients themselves that hope that. Of course, we'd hope it would go away, but when it's become chronic, sometimes that's not always possible. But it's not only patients that want it to go away. Like Sam was saying, there's relationships with family members. Sometimes family members are, like, why can't you do stuff with me? Kids, why can't my parents be involved, or my grandparents be involved with things because they have pain? And employers, they want us to be cured so that we can get back to work. And there's a lot of expectations about this that I think people get frustrated by the journey of pain. They want it to be kind of fixed straight away. And even clinicians are disappointed or frustrated when patients just don't get better, right? So I guess, that's one of the things I would hope, that when we're trying to understand pain and these individual journeys that are all so very different, that we be patient with it and extend maybe a little grace with it, because these aren't things that just go away so quickly. So that's what I would say.
Okay, Dr. Rhonda?
I am going to take a different approach as usual. I'm going to
Okay.
say what pain should not be. I am a pharmacist by training, and being a pharmacist, I was taught about a lot of clinical guidelines. It's really easy to take a patient and check the boxes and say, it looks like you need to go down this treatment path, or this is first line therapy, and there's literature surrounding that. I don't think pain should be any of that. It's not something that you could put into a box. It's not cookie cutter medicine. It's a very individualized experience. Now, here I am, and I'm very grateful to be here, but I think, again, we need to push the conversation and kind of redefine that term. And that term also should be inclusive of spirituality, maybe that's not necessarily rooted in Christianity. It could be your individual views. It should be cultural norms. It should be dietary issues. It should encompass every aspect of a person's life, as well as using a community-based approach. Because again, when we have some of our most talented people, and everybody has a talent or something to contribute, it is robbing our community of very rich resources and the ability to make things better. So thank you.
All right, thank you. So Dr. Ronnie, I wanted to ask you this question, because this is the title of our seminar tonight. It is this: what does it mean to manage your pain and to make sure that it doesn't manage you? How would you respond to that?
For many people that are struggling with pain, myself included, there's been times where it becomes all consuming. And so, that's one of the, when we came up with that title, what does it mean? That your pain doesn't manage you. I think the idea is so that you don't let it be directing every aspect and overtaking all aspects of your life. And that can be really, really hard, because when you have chronic pain, it does take up a lot of real estate. It's really difficult. When you're experiencing pain, you can't do things, and then have so many expectations from the outside world of the things you need and have to do. So I think, to me, what it means to manage your pain so that it doesn't overtake you and consume you is to try and find those things that maybe give you a little bit of space between you and your pain, give you a little bit of a sense of control. And there are a range of things, patients often find these on their own. Prayer as a way of, just finding a little peace and with yourself and your pain. Mindfulness, relaxed breathing, yoga, gentle movements, and there are a range of things that are out there and that are accessible. But I think one of the things we have to do is make them more accessible to the community at large, and bring them out into the community. You know, these, you can find things on the internet here and there, but you know, how do you bring it together, bring it into a cohesive way and a cohesive package so that, you know, people can choose what will work for them. So really, you know, when I'm saying what it means to manage your pain instead of managing you, it's finding those things that can just give you a little bit of space and allow you to make some other, you know, maybe choices, and not always feel like it's driving you through your life.
Thank you very much. Sam, what does it mean to manage your pain and make sure that it doesn't manage you?
Well, I think it goes back to what the doctor was saying about the focus, right? So if I use myself as an example, and my family, because again, in my family, now that I think about it, chronic pain has been part of our family all the way back to my grandmother, my mother's mother, who did a lot of physical suffering with pain. But she was also suffering from other things along with the pain, like depression, in sadness in terms of some family issues and those kind of things. And the other piece around that is sometimes in our need to be strong, in some cultures even more so, is this ideal that suffering is part of life, right? That because of the other areas that we might suffer in, right? So sucking it up, as that can go through gender issues, but community issues, like because I do a lot of work around trauma within community, with working with men, which there's suffering and part of that, and that's a kind of a pain as well, is when you are conditioned, when people kind of give you this condition that suffering is part of life, and there's going to be pain, you might not take that, you might feel guilty about that, right? About this pain you got that that has really literally stopped your life, but you're conditioned to believe, I can't allow that to happen, right? And this can't be true, and those kind of things. But I know for me is went to the doctor, the first doctor had to convince somehow, because certain things didn't show up on the x-ray, found out later on, I had damaged the muscles on both sides of my spine. So I didn't have the typical fully slipped disc or anything. And that was like doctor number 3. So I had to fight through that piece of not feeling like, I'm being believed, sent back to work and forth, all that. And then going through the depression, gaining 100 pounds, because now I'm watching soap operas when they were popular, and eating a half a gallon of ice cream, watching soap operas and baking the chicken and eating that later. And so by the time I go to the pain clinic, I'm, 100 pounds heavier. And so that's not good for your body, right? And then to go to the pain clinic and they start talking about relaxation and imagery. And my thing is, oh, you trying to do some voodoo on me and try to make me think that ain't my pain. It ain't real. But the biggest thing that I had to learn how to do is step back and be able to address the fact that I was scared and allow myself to try new things, right? And then when I started doing some therapy and start connecting the dots in terms of how pain was dealt with in our house and suffering, because I think that word suffering is a big part of this, because we have some control on how we suffer. Sometimes we don't know that, But I used to tell this story when I used to give lectures on chronic pain. The story, because I think there was a question about, spirituality and that kind of piece. And when I talk about spirituality, I'm talking about that whole thing of believing that there's something greater than you, right? Sometimes you might not always know what it is, but you can feel it. And my grandmother, one of the things about her is she had been suffering in so many parts of her life that when she died, even the doctor was surprised because she was doing well, right? And I call spirit, this part of spirituality or that spirit as the pilot light of a person's life. I mean, if you've been in situations where you're seeing a person who looks like the Walking Dead, they're alive, but you don't see no light in their eyes. You don't see that spirit going on. I literally watched my grandmother, who was just tired of suffering, and it wasn't just physical pain, who just died. Just lay there and died because she was tired, right? So that probably gives you an idea of the larger piece. But I just learned how to allow myself to learn new things, figure out what worked, what didn't work. You would never thought I would dealt with acupressure using little needles, but that stuff works. I still periodically have to use medications, but I keep track of that. I still have flare-ups in my back where I can't even get out of bed, but they don't scare me anymore. I know that if I slow down, use the heating pad, maybe take some medication if I need it or have it, or even figure out ways to, these techniques that I have learned gave me my life back, right? And because the pain in my book had taken my life, and then understand what that life should be, understand how to generate some hope even with pain. And one of the things I'm gonna end with this statement here is when I used to do the work at the pain clinic and meet with my clients would say, Mr. Simmons, when did you realize you didn't have any more pain? And I said, it wasn't that I realized I didn't have no more pain. What I realized is it wasn't the main focus anymore. And that's when I felt like I was doing that.
Dr. Rhonda, what does it mean to manage pain and to make sure that it doesn't manage you?
Well, I'm going to interject something from a clinician perspective, right? Too.
Okay, go ahead.
And so I want to kind of piggyback on what Sam said. There's this thing called the placebo effect, that 50% of the time, if I tell you that it's going to work, that it actually will. And so even for myself, it kind of goes back to that whole experience of pain, right? Feeling guilty because I was told my ancestors suffered. They didn't complain. That is part of that experience, much like mental health. You don't talk about pain because maybe that makes you weak or not grateful, or somehow you're not upholding what you should be doing in part of your lived experience. So managing your pain also means being open, but it also means being real with saying, it's not working for me. I think what terrified me in 2016 was I was in a doctor's office, and I am a pharmacist. Of course, that doesn't make it any different for me, but I had a clinician who had no problem handing me 5 prescriptions, brand new, in one visit. And I thought to myself, if that's happening to me, I can't imagine how many other people who are experiencing these things. And immediately for me, I fired that doctor. I went looking for other things. But I also have been really instrumental in kind of talking to people in my circle of saying, why do we accept pain and suffering as part of our lived experience? Why do we not challenge that? Because again, if we accept that as our experience, we already eliminate the possibility that we could be pain-free. And so again, for me, managing it is really shifting our mindset shifting this conversation and really questioning those things that we've been handed to over centuries, that we are told that are part of our identity, and really challenging those ideals.
Thank you. Thank you. So do you remember my story when I first started off talking about my pain? I want to ask you a question. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Simmons, first. When should someone decide to seek help for their pain?
Um, Again, that's individual. I think sometimes it has to do with what caused the pain. But if it's not getting better, I would say within a week or whatever. If it's something, it's like when you said you stubbed your toe playing football, and you still got some pain after a week or so, or whatever. And again, as individual, you can go, have it checked out, because sometimes um, we can do something, and pain is an important piece to tell us something's wrong, right? And so we should not ignore that. And so if because we can get these twists, and you can bend over trying to lift something, and and over a few days, long as you do, slow down, and that kind of stuff, it will decrease, or it might even appear to go away. But I would say, if you still got excruciating pain, and the pain is not reading up, I would say some people, I would say go within a week. But again, if it's something like I'm in a car accident or something like that, I might go sooner. So it all depends on when it happens, and again, it still comes down to individually. But pain is a useful thing, in terms of our body. It is there to say something is wrong, and so we're not saying you're supposed to ignore it, but we're also talking about, we don't want to get to a point where it consumes our lives.
Excellent. Dr. Ronnie?
Generally, I agree with Sam, and I guess I'd add to it that if you have pain where you feel like you can't cope with it, then you might need to, it's time to see someone. And, sometimes, you can handle it with some of the medications that you have, or other ways to keep it under control. But if it's keeping you from doing things you need to do, if you feel like you're starting to use substances more than you normally would to manage your pain, if it feels like it's again overwhelming you, depressing you, suicide, there's a lot of people, I read a statistic recently that 10% they're estimating of suicide deaths are attributed to pain, and that's considered a huge underestimate. And so it is possible that you get to a point where you just feel like you can't cope, and that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. The pain is overwhelming you. And so that's when I would, when it gets to be like that, I think I'd reach out to someone right away.
Thank you. Dr. Rhonda?
Well, again, I think for me, I remember growing up with a song called "I Haven't Got Time for the Pain." And so that really affected my experience and my willingness to deal with pain. Before we talk about when should people seek treatment for pain, let's talk about access and affordability. Let's talk about, I was in pharmacy school as a single mother. Do I have time to take off to deal with this issue? How am I going to manage other elements of my life? And so I would say, anytime you have a situation that threatens the integrity of your whole ecosystem, or all the connecting pieces of your life, it is just much better to deal with it. It just can be difficult to navigate those challenges. And then again, even from my personal experience, entering the healthcare system when you're vulnerable also can be very triggering for people saying, well, you're just here for opioids, or you're just here for this, or you're just here because you don't want to take a test, or you're just here because you want to be off work. When in reality, people have failed to consider what is actually driving my willingness to seek treatment. And I think as we have these conversations about pain, this is a wonderful opportunity to say, hey, what if I could take some of these modalities that are out here, mindfulness, acupuncture, different things into the community that haven't traditionally been into the community, to at least start people to say, hey, you know what, I have a real problem here. And then better yet, when we're in that setting, how do I connect people with resources so that the treatment of pain does not compromise my ability to take care of my kids, my ability to pay my rent, my ability to put food on the table. And again, managing that and seeking treatment for pain should always be first. Again, as a clinician, I cannot get on here and talk about the silent killer, heart attacks. And in particular, in African-American women, we have that, we suffer from those. It could be radiating jaw pain. And the sooner you get treatment, the better it is. So thank you.
I think those have been some really, really great comments. And so let's talk about now. We have discussed the fact that there are problems with the system, right, as relates to pain and how it's accessed by people. The question I want to ask now, we're going to start with you, Dr. Ronnie. How do we change the system if we know that it's creating problems for individuals and for specific or certain populations? How do we change this system?
It's going to be hard. But I think we need to persist and come together and make some noise about this, how broken it is. I think patients, as tiresome as it gets for patients to have to tell their stories over and over again and fire their doctors like Rhonda did, right? And find better care. I think patients have to continue to try and be advocates for themselves and speak up when they feel like they aren't getting the care they need. And if they feel like they can't, to find others that can help advocate with them. And I think that's where the role of the community comes in. I think the community can actually play, community-based organizations can play a big role in being able to support people in this way. I also think that because it's going to take us a long time to change the system, Rome wasn't built in a day. I think we have to move some of the stuff that's in the system behind these walls out into the community so people have access sooner. Because if we wait to change the system, I just don't think we can afford to wait. But I don't think we can stop trying either. I think we have to do all of that. Another big thing that I've been working with is training healthcare providers to be more in tune and sensitive and better prepared to deal with people who are really suffering and who have barriers and challenges that these providers don't have. And I can tell you, it's something that that's quite a process because clinicians haven't been trained to deal with social issues. It's rather stunning. So, I think we have a lot of work to do, and I think we're all going to have to do it on all fronts. But I think we all have a role to play in changing the system and then working outside the system to make things better for patients.
Thank you. Dr. Rhonda.
This is
How do
my
we change the
favorite part.
Huh?
I was going to say to Ronnie, I know Rome wasn't built in a day, but one of my sayings is I wasn't the supervisor. I refuse to accept that these things are going to take a long time. I think we've hidden behind that for so long that to create systemic change, it's this process of 20 or 30 years. Immediately, there are a lot of things we can do, right? One, the first step starts with let's recruit and retain people of the community who have that experience and train them to become chiropractors, pharmacists, physicians, and researchers, so that they have a connection to the community, that they're vested in wanting to solve a problem. And then let's start with these institutions and let's look at curriculum reform, where social stuff and conversations on death and dying and pain management are not electives, they're an integral part. One thing that I think I learned from my mother was the humility that she made me feel surrounding filling out a application for state assistance. Every practitioner should have that experience. Every practitioner should have to go through a mock interview so that they understand from a firsthand perspective what it feels to be like on that side. You can't really say that you really have empathy unless you've actually gone through something in a meaningful way. And another way is to really just start saying, hey, the community, they're experts. But again, when we talk about the system, we haven't given people the cheat codes. Healthcare providers, we use acronyms, we use these terms, we use referrals, we use prior authorizations. There's all of these things that are out there that are creating barriers for people who, even though you're very literate, you can have a PhD, but your health literacy may not be the highest. So again, we have to be very intentional about that. The other thing is really what I'm excited is seeing is these initiatives that actually bring people with diverse perspectives and diverse experiences to say, how can we attempt to solve a problem, and understanding that this is not going to go away and that we're going to have to continue to be innovative and willing to challenge existing norms and do so in a way that is meaningful and mindful of community. And really, again, I think for me, my experience is I am one of the few people, one of the few pharmacists that are in North Minneapolis that went to the University of Minnesota. That's very rare. What are we doing at these institutions to help retain talent in our state for our community? Again, when we lose talent, right, we're losing a wonderful set of skills and assets. So I can get on my soapbox all day. Again, I just want to challenge people to say it doesn't have to take a long time. You can create a ripple effect by moving things into the community. Access doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to come if you build it, but if you have conversations and you have the right people at the table, you'll get buy-in and you will create change. Thank you.
So before I have you answer Mr. Simmons about how do we change the system, I want to remind our listeners and those who are participating that you also can ask questions of the panel as well. So please use the chat to ask any questions that you might have. And now, Mr. Simmons, how are we going to change the system?
Well, I mean, I don't know if there's a whole lot I can add to what's already been said, but I know that the part that I try to play is I have this belief that a community is as strong as the information is given. And sometimes information about what's going on, information about the larger view around pain and the connection to, because there was a question in there, how do you connect pain and trauma? Well, sometimes how we suffer with our trauma also affects how we will suffer with our physical pain, and they're connected. So I think what I've done is been able to talk to people in a language they can understand about chronic pain, about different methods in pain, those kind of pieces. But the more information we can give to our community so they can do that advocacy and force those issues is important. Also, educating the new folks coming into the systems, right? I do a lot of training in terms of how to sustain staff of color, a lot of training around the historical trauma in terms of especially the African American community, how to connect those dots. When people feel mistreated, certain things they won't ask for over time, or certain conclusions they make around their suffering. And when I do that with students, especially medical students, they'll look at me like, Mr. Simmons, why ain't nobody telling us this? Because they don't know it either, and it's out of their control. One of the quotes I often make: people in power got to be willing to be uncomfortable if we want to make some change, right? And some people in the systems, and probably a lot, feel like they have the right to comfort, and because of their right of comfort, they are not allowing people in, and they're not listening to folks, and it is not good. So that change, I agree, that change is not, we gotta wait and all this other kind of stuff, because we got young people out here who are ready and who are willing to do this. And we empower more and more of these young people, and old dudes like me support them. I think they can make it happen because they want to know. Again, when I deal with medical students in terms of when they show up at my trainings, it's like nobody's telling us this. Nobody's connecting these dots for us, right? And the other piece is this thing I call compassionate accountability. It's always easier to work with folks we recognize, we feel comfortable with. But if we don't believe that everybody we work with in the system, this is for all our system people, no matter what level you are, if you don't believe everybody you work with deserves compassion, even if you don't particularly care for them personally, then you shouldn't be doing this work.
Well said. Well said. Well said. Dr. Ronnie, this is the first in a series of conversations. Oh, that you can hear me? Okay. This is the first in a series of conversations that we're going to have with the community about this whole issue of pain. Why don't you just share with our listeners the genesis of this? Because I know that many of the people that you're talking about here is that you're taking a look at the well-being for people who are underrepresented and marginalized. Talk a little bit about that that um, that interest, and then I'm going to ask Sam and Rhonda to talk about why they're part of the committee, because I think that's important. That's important too.
And before I get there, I just want to say, Rhonda, you had your hand up.
I did raise my hand.
And I want to give you the opportunity because I think you wanted to add something to what Sam
I did. And so I actually wanted to say something to really recognize the work that Sam Simmons has done. I think when we talk about changing the system, right, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of stuff out there that works, but we got to be willing to, as we say, get comfortable with the uncomfortable and be willing to say, hey, you know what? I know I went to school, I graduated at this, I have this, but what you have to offer in your lived experience is so invaluable and so necessary that it would eliminate a lot of this, me digging into the literature, trying to figure out what Cohen or what this person said about a particular subject, when we have 20 or 30 years of practice in evidence-based medicine right in front of us. So that is the comment I just wanted to add. So thank you.
And Mr. Simmons, I'm gonna let you respond to that.
Well, I don't do well with all this compliment stuff.
I know.
That's
but
why
I'm
you
gonna let you try
messing
it.
with me.
That's
But
why.
I'm gonna say thank you. I'm gonna leave it alone. Say
Wow.
I tried.
That's short. Okay, Ronnie. Let's talk.
What
Let's
was,
talk. Let's talk
what
about this
was the
project.
question again?
Oh, well, the question was, this particular project is going to be conducted. This is the first a part of a series of conversations about this, and this project is really looking at back pain and neck pain for people who have been underrepresented and marginalized. Why? are you doing this? And then I'm going to ask Mr. Simmons and I'm going to ask Rhonda, why are they a part of this team?
Yeah, so you're talking about the Partners for Pain project, and the reason we're doing it and focusing on marginalized populations is because there's been so little research in this area. And I'm just a little story of how this started. We had been doing another project before, and that's how I came to meet Rhonda. She joined our community advisory team. And actually that was because I had met you, Clarence. You were part of a project we were doing, and you started talking to saying, you need to talk to the community more. You need to be doing, more to engage people. You introduced me to Sam. And so we started to work on this when I approached you all, when the National Institutes of Health came out with a call for proposals and said, we want to focus on marginalized and underrepresented populations in dealing with pain. When I asked all of you, I said, should we do this? And true to Dr. Rhonda's attitude of we can do this, she said, yeah, let's do it. And you all stepped up and said, yeah, let's go for it. And so we got the funding, and as part of this project, the whole Living Well with Pain series, which is going to be continued conversations with the community, will hopefully bring others into this conversation where we can continue to talk about things that the community cares about in relationship to their pain and continue to learn from them. And I encourage anybody out in the audience who has ideas of other things that they'd like to hear about going forward to please drop that in the chat. We'd love to hear from you, because that will help us inform us going forward with that series.
Mr. Simmons, why are you a part of this group?
Oh, wow. The smart aleck answer because you asked me. But part of it was I seen over the last, because the pain clinic I worked in closed in 2005. And I seen the writing on the wall right then when around that time, prescription opioids was off the chain back then, actually before then, really. And I started seeing where this area about helping people manage their pain, how far down it was going. And the fact that folks came to me and asked me to be part of this, and the idea that, maybe I might have something to add in my old age, made me curious in about doing this, because if I didn't hear the right stuff from this group of folks, I wouldn't be here right now, because I'm too old to waste my time. So,
I concur with that response, Mr. Simmons.
So that's probably my best answer, is that's why I'm still here and still working with these great individuals, because I've always believed that there was a better way, especially when I had already experienced a better way to help people manage their pains in all aspects.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Rhonda, why are you here?
Why am I not here is the question, huh?
Okay.
I am excited. I am passionate. I love the opportunity to be able to use my clinical knowledge and training to do something meaningful. Ever since I was in the sciences, I thought, how cool would it be for me to be able to be involved in a research initiative, one that was mindful of community, that could actually be used as the new best practices and the way to conduct research in a community, and to also hold people accountable and disseminate information, and refusing to accept that dissemination of information would take 10 years to put into practice. So that's why I'm here. I want to be a part of that change that we can see. And so again, going back to my comment on the placebo effect, 50% of the time it's going to work. And it is always about the possibility. So that's why I'm here.
Mrs. Simmons, you had a question? A comment?
Well, I needed to respond to a question in the chat
Okay.
around sickle cell. right? Because one of the other reasons I ended up working in the pain clinic is we were starting to have sickle cell patients come through, and one who came through and ended up being a good friend of mine later on, a gentleman by the name of Scott Robinson. He was assigned to me, and one of the things I started noticing is that when you're talking about sickle cell, and you're talking about episodes, and you're talking about medical folks who don't understand sickle cell or haven't bothered to understand sickle cell. So let me keep it real. Haven't bothered because it's been, because it's more seen in the Black communities. One of the things that would really happen is when they would have an episode, they would need more medication to get through the episode and would be treated so harshly. And there was times where I had to show up in the emergency room and kind of clown with the little bit of clout I did have, and get them the help to get through those episodes. And I think in terms of our community and community needs, that's still a major need around that area of sickle cell, and educating folks about that. Not only the medical profession, but families. Because I remember Scott talking about his cousins thinking that he was just using sickle cell as an excuse not to be able to do anything. I watched this man suffer. I watched this man beat the odds in terms of how long he lived. He did pass 3-4 years ago, but he got past his 40th birthday. That was one of his goals, and raised his son until he was a teenager. But I watched that, and so that's one of the areas that I started learning more about sickle cell, and then we was able to to really get my head doctor to really understand sickle cell more and advocate for these sickle cell patients. But back in the day, and again, I still see that happening to a degree too. These doctors, and which were all white, were treating these poor people so bad because they automatically believed that if you were a Black person, all you was seeking medications. And again, I remember a person, a professional who was speaking about opioid issues, and he got up there and said, well, you African Americans should be glad we didn't prescribe you as many medications as we did everybody else. He didn't finish the statement that's because you didn't see our humanity, and was being paid to give this lecture. So that just brings up some of my stuff. So I'm acting out a little bit, but
Yes, you do. It's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
So I'm gonna move on. I'm done.
Okay, but one of the, I'm going to tell you why I'm on this committee. It's because I have the opportunity to work with such great people. It's great having Sam. It's great talking to Ron. I mean, these are community people, and Ronnie and Doug. I mean, it's just really great to be in a group of people where I sincerely believe that an effort is going to be made in order to make our community healthier. That is really what I'm about, and I really believe that this project is one of those projects that can make a difference, and we want to make a difference. And so I do thank you. I don't know if there's any other questions that the audience have for you all.
I
I'm
do
looking.
see a couple, so I just
Can you see
wanted
it?
to, I do,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
I
Go
do
ahead.
see one, and first of all, I do think it's necessary that we do recognize the Sickle Cell Foundation of Minnesota,
Right.
and Ray and her work that she has done. I think they have been very instrumental in challenging those existing guidelines. The other thing I think we're going to be seeing as what I can say as a pharmacist is that we don't even touch on is that all of us metabolize drugs differently, right? And so for myself, I found out I'm an ultra rapid metabolizer, which means by the time they give me a dose of a opioid medication, it basically doesn't work unless they're giving me higher and higher amounts. And so I think we're going to see that. But I think also we would really be remiss not to say that there has been a change in the CDC guidelines. So that's the Center for Disease Control guidelines on how they manage opioid medications. And I think as a community and as constituents and as patients, we have to remember too, we are sources of revenue. If you don't go to the doctor's office, they don't get paid. And so we can hold them accountable and say, hey, you know, guidelines are just meant to guide the practice. Doesn't mean that that is a one size fits all. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Was there another question inside of the chat or not? Okay. Why don't we do this? As we're getting closer to the end, I'd like for you to just give some last comments on this topic. What do you want the community to know? Sam, we'll go with you. Well, we'll go with you last, Sam. We're going to go with Ronnie first, and Rhonda. Then we're going to end up with Mr. Simmons.
No, I see there's still some questions
Okay.
open in the chat, and to answer your question, what do we want people in the community to know? You know, the first thing is you're not alone, and if you're struggling with pain, others are too, and we hear that a lot, that people feel very isolated with their pain. And what we're hoping is that you know, conversations like this can encourage people to feel more comfortable about talking about their pain to others, and then providers, family members, friends, and just want you to know that you aren't alone. And if you're struggling, there's not something wrong with you. That's what I want to leave you with.
Thank you. Dr. Rhonda?
I saw one more question here, and
Okay,
I
go
wanted
ahead.
to acknowledge that. First of all, there are several clinicians attending. And so as a clinician myself, I do understand how it can be challenging to be in an appointment where you have these check boxes that are tied to reimbursement, how adherent your patient is to medication. You know, did they get their flu shot even though they're there for pain management? And so I think part of it is really understanding that a lot can't be necessarily accomplished in those clinical visits. But again, this is a case for expanding services and having resources in the community that people can access, or even have an advocate so that they can help frame their questions prior to their visit to make them more meaningful. And finally, my final comment, I wanted to say thank you all for allowing me to be a part of this conversation. As you can see, I'm very passionate about my community. I do believe change can happen. And I always look forward to working with these individuals in this group, but I am looking forward to engaging with other people in the community and hearing from diverse people and diverse perspectives that even challenge my own. So I'll just leave with that. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Simmons, take us home.
I mean, I don't have a lot to say, but one of the things I will offer is if you reach out to me, I'm willing to meet with anybody and work with folks and work with organizations around these different things and try to add a different kind of voice to this. Because again, I think this is so important, and I've been so disappointed about the approaches to pain, especially when we leaned all the way to medication only. Some pain clinics for a long time, it was only injections, medications, and some more injections. And they called that pain management. And that was appalling. It's still appalling to me. It depends, and if somebody's listening and in one of those programs, so be it. But I appreciate you attending. And again, I'll put in one of my emails if you want to reach out to me in particular. And I'm also thankful to be able to be part of this group.
Yeah. I want to also end by saying thank you for all of those who attended. I want to thank you, our panelists, for the enlightenment that you gave me as we went through these topics and these questions. I think it's important that we continue to do the work. I know that we are committed to making the work happen. And listeners, I would just like for you to just keep listening and keep watching, because we will be back. and we will have another topic next time. And so I'm going to turn it over back to Makeda, and she will actually take us home.
Well, you all have done such a fantastic job of having a conversation that is so meaningful, and of course, leads to many other conversations. And that was really the goal of this. And why another reason why you all are a part of the committee, right? Is this is not the end. This is just the beginning for us to have deeper conversations. And so I want to try to reflect on some of the things I heard today after I just first say thank you. Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you, Brother Sam. Thank you, Sister Rhonda. And I have to say Sister Rhonda because, you know, we have some excellence on the panel. She also happens to be an AKA. And a lot of times you think that these Alpha Kappa Alpha women just run around here looking cute, but they're smart too. So yes, we need a little laughter. That helps us with our pain. Pain, some of the things I heard with pain is personal. We each have a personal journey. And not that pain is the journey, but we each have a personal journey and a personal experience with pain. And we had a list in the Q&A that gave about 10 different ways of looking at pain. Pain is also a teacher or a tool. It lets us know something's going on. Many of us have learned, you know, I know there was a question about trauma and pain and what's the connection. Many of us have learned to ignore our pain. And sometimes until we end up in the hospital, we've learned to ignore our bodies, the tension in our backs, in our hips, in our knees, in our necks. Sometimes we forget how our voices have changed because of the tension from trying to hold back what we need to say, or from saying it so loud so you can finally hear us. And that's one of the ways that we're going to change the system, not 10 years from now, but in the very near future, as Dr. Rhonda has said. The placebo effect, if I tell you it works, sometimes it will. I know another part of pain is making sure that we have a positive outlook, that we're looking for things to happen. I won't go on with my own personal story of pain or sickness, but I will tell you that during that time, the best piece of advice I got was to make sure that I kept positive things around me at all times. Pain is an individual experience. It's important to look at our individual attitudes and to make sure that we are advocating for ourselves. It's also important to recognize that we are in community. And so those of us who are part of unique families, we recognize when our folks are in pain sometimes before they do because of the way they are behaving. And a lot of times we just get out the way. Sometimes we might need to go ahead and tell them, say, hey, what's going on? So that they recognize what's happening. Access and affordability. I'm sure there'll be more than one session on that one. The last two things I will say is that remember that motion is lotion. There's a place over here in North Minneapolis called the Northside Healing Space. It's on 21st and Emerson. At that space, there is free acupuncture on Mondays. It's pay what you can. Starts at 5 o'clock on Monday evenings. And then to totally end, there's a book and there was a movie out. Years ago, I don't know if you all remember the movie John Q with Denzel Washington. It was looking at our healthcare system and how to change that, and how we might not understand all the different rules until it's really in a rough time to try and understand it. And then there's a book called The Body Keeps Score. Check out that book. But until then, I want to thank you for joining us for the UROC Critical Conversation, Living Well with Pain, Managing Pain so it does not manage you. And we will look forward to seeing you in the spring for our next conversation. I thank the panelists again, and Clarence Jones, thank you so much for your wonderful job moderating. And then I will also want to thank the committee, the planning committee that put this together, and especially Doug Kennedy, who keeps us all together, and we appreciate him. So with that, have a great night.